تقبلني من الإعجاب عيناها
وأبحر في مدى الدنيا وعالمها إلى زمن تعدد في زواياه أرى حلقاته فأذوب من وله ويهتف خاطري الله الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. صدق الله العظيم. This workshop today is going to be about fasting in the month of Ramadan, the rules and regulations related to it. And before we proceed, we need to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about fasting in the Quran and what is the purpose behind fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, O people of Iman, fasting has been prescribed upon you, meaning it has been obligated upon you as it was obligated upon the people before you. And the purpose behind it is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you can gain taqwa. You can get the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No sound? This one is on. इसको on off करें फिर. इसको ऑफ करके फिर ऑन कर दें. Keep it pressed. Bismillah. Hear it now? Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O people of Iman, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon the people before you. And prescribed here means that made obligatory upon you, as it was made obligatory upon the people before you. And the purpose is mentioned in the ayah, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you can gain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the question is, how does a person get the taqwa? Through staying hungry. How does a person get an awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Through becoming hungry. So there are various reasons for this. First and foremost, when a person is hungry, the natural tendency of a person is to basically turn his attention towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And his inclination towards worldly things, it diminishes. And that is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to tell the youth of Medina, Ya ma'ashara shabab, man istata'a minkum al-ba'ata falyatazawwaj, wa man lam yastati' fa'alayhi bis-sawm, فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاء. O youth, whoever has the ability from amongst you to get married, he should do so. And whoever does not have the ability, he should fast, because that will be a protection for him. So when a person is fasting, it basically suppresses his other desires. And his attention then turns towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because his focus is not on desires anymore. So through doing that continuously, the person's taqwa will increase. Another way that a person's taqwa will increase is that a person consistently and continuously reminds himself that he is being watched by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For many reasons. Firstly, when a person is fasting, he is trying his best to also stay away from other sins. So fasting is not just to stay hungry and thirsty. It is also to observe good manners, to guard one's eyes, to guard one's chastity, to guard one's tongue, to guard one's ears, and so on, from doing things which are not appropriate. You know, there's a saying that I heard one day, that it's not a hadith or anything, but it's just something thought-provoking. That during the month of Ramadan, what happens is that things which are already halal upon us, meaning eating is halal, and drinking halal things is halal, permissible, and intimacy with one's wife is halal. These things are generally halal. But these halal things basically become haram. So these halal things, when they become haram, what do you think of those things which are already haram? That's something to reflect upon. That it's not just a case of staying hungry and thirsty, rather it's a whole lifestyle change that a person has to adopt, and practicing that for 30 days is supposed to carry one through the next year. It's not just for the month of Ramadan. The spiritual batteries are being recharged so that a person, he gets that awareness which carries him through until the next Ramadan, by which time a person's, again, iman becomes weak, and then he refreshes it by the coming back of Ramadan. Also, when a person is fasting, he constantly tells himself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. So if he is alone in the house and the refrigerator is full of ice cold Coke, ice cold soda, there's nothing preventing him from going to the refrigerator except the thing that tells him in his mind that nobody is here in this house with me, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. So constantly reminding oneself of that over 30 days increases an awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which subsequently results in the taqwa developing within oneself. Another way that a person's taqwa develops in Ramadan is that he feels the hunger and thirst of the people that are less fortunate than himself. Okay? In other times, you might see pictures of poor people, starving people. You're not really moved that much. But when in the month of Ramadan we are feeling that hunger, we are feeling that thirst, then a person has a renewed understanding of the difficulties that people are facing, not just in the month of Ramadan, but throughout the whole year. And in turn, what happens is that a person then becomes more generous in the month of Ramadan. And this was actually the habit of the Prophet ﷺ also. His generosity increased in the month of Ramadan. According to hadith, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أجود الناس. The Prophet ﷺ was the most generous of people. But in Ramadan, وكان أجود ما كان في رمضان. He used to become even more generous, the most generous, in the month of Ramadan. حين يلقاه جبريل, when Jibreel alayhi salam used to meet him, فيدارسه القرآن, and they used to review the Quran with each other. And then the hadith goes on to say that at that point he used to become more generous than even the wind. So the wind, when it blows into every nook and cranny, every hole, every gap. So the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ didn't leave anybody untouched. So the same thing applies to Muslims. They should become more generous, and they do become more generous in Ramadan because of the fact that they feel the hunger and thirst of the people that are less fortunate than themselves. Also, many people make it a point to give their zakat in Ramadan too. So these are the things which are related to the purpose behind Ramadan, which is the taqwa. In addition to that, we should try our best to increase our recitation of the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ used to finish one Quran every Ramadan, and in the last year of his life, he finished 2 Qurans. The easy way to finish the Quran is to participate in the Taraweeh in a place where the Quran is completed. Okay, like here, we have the Quran completed in 29 nights. So if you participate in all of the Taraweeh behind the Imam, then you will get the complete Quran. And another way, in addition to that, it's very simple. After every Salat, a person just takes 5 to 10 minutes to recite the Quran in Ramadan. In a lunch break, a person is not going to eat, obviously. So instead of wasting time chatting idly, a person can take that time and open up the Mus'haf and start reciting the Quran. So by doing that, very easily a person can finish the complete Quran twice, once in Taraweeh and once by himself. So this is what we should try to be doing, inshallah. So the fasting is one of the pillars of Islam. 5 pillars that we've learned from from childhood. Something which is obligatory, if we reject it and we don't believe in it, that person becomes a disbeliever. Very, very clear cut. There is, there's ample evidence for this. Many people who are neglectful of this fasting, they say things, they say words of kufr, they say words of disbelief. They say that, fasting is for poor people. Fasting is for people who cannot afford to eat. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligate fasting upon us? Why did He want us to become hungry or thirsty? So it's one thing to be lazy about fasting. A person, he is lazy, or he doesn't have the mental strength and capacity to fast himself, but he realizes that he has a weakness and he intends to make tawbah one day. That's one thing. But to justify his actions or her actions by making such derogatory statements about Islam and about fasting, it does take a person out of Islam. If a person believes that this thing is not obligated upon us, and in basically anything that is mujma' alay, that is by consensus known to be obligatory upon us as an ummah, if we reject any part of it, that takes a person out of iman and into disbelief. So we need to understand that. Fasting is obligatory upon every sane adult who is not traveling and who's not sick. There are 4 conditions. A person is an adult, he is sane, meaning he's not insane, doesn't have any mental deficiency. He is an adult, he is not traveling, and he is not sick. And for the women, not pregnant or menstruating or in post-childbirth bleeding. Okay, all of these reasons, they actually exempt a person from fasting. So if you're sane, if you're adult, if you're not traveling, and if you're not sick, then fasting is obligatory upon you. Okay, as for the menstruating and bleeding, postpartum bleeding, it is, again, all of the schools of thought, all of the 4 schools of thought agree that it is not valid for women during menstruation and bleeding following childbirth, but they do have to make it up later. As opposed to salat, salat is something that they don't have to make up later, because the continuous obligation of salat every single month basically becomes too much. But fasting, it only comes around easily throughout the year. So menstruating or being in postpartum childbirth bleeding, that also would not obligate the salat from you. Illness is something that does not obligate fasting. The Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi'i and Maliki schools state that if one who is fasting falls ill or fears the aggravation of his illness, so he's sick, but he knows that he can start fasting, but he knows that his illness will become worse by fasting, so he fears the aggravation of his illness, or he feels that there will be a delay in recovery. There will be a delay in recovery. He or she has the option to fast or refrain. So they have both the options. Okay, a person can fast, but also the option is to refrain. Fasting is not incumbent upon that person. Where there is a likelihood of death, where there is a likelihood that a person may die or lose any of the senses. Okay, sometimes a person, he becomes so hungry that he loses his faculties, loses his mind, he loses his eyes. Something happens to him. For example, a person who's diabetic, okay, low sugar, high sugar, whatever happens, a person can go into a coma. Okay, a person can also lose his limbs because of poor circulation when a person is diabetic. So losing any one of the senses or fear of death, it is obligatory upon that person not to fast. He is obligated not to fast in that situation. Fear of death or fear of loss of any of the senses. This is across all the schools of thought. All the schools of thought agree upon this. A woman who's in the final stage of pregnancy, okay? So this is the time when the fetus, it needs the most nutrition. Okay? Even in the beginning stages, when there's a lot of morning sickness, etc., sometimes, and because of that, there's a lack of nutrition. Upon the doctor's advice, and usually the best thing to do is ask a Muslim doctor who's aware of the obligation. A non-Muslim may not be able to understand the whole concept of fasting and will not be able to give a decision with a complete understanding of what Ramadan is about. So better to ask a Muslim doctor and take his or her advice related to this. Okay, so the Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi'i and Maliki, all four schools of thought say that if a person, pregnant or nursing woman, fears harm for her own health or that of her child, her fasting is valid. If she fasts, it is valid, though it is permissible for her to refrain from fasting. And if she opts for not fasting, all the schools also concur, meaning all four schools of thought, they agree that she is bound to perform its missed days later. She has to perform them later. Now the question is this. A woman, for example, she is pregnant. During the course of pregnancy, the whole month of Ramadan, she doesn't fast. The next year, she is feeding her child and she refrains from fasting because of the fact that she's feeding her child breastfeeding, okay? And she loses her milk, or she doesn't produce enough milk because of hunger, because of lack of nutrition. So again, she refrains from fasting. She couldn't make it up during the year, and she refrains from fasting the next Ramadan also. And possibly if she is feeding the child for 2 years, then even another Ramadan may come about, okay? So 3 years continuously, she misses her fasting. So what's she going to do? It's pretty much impossible for her to make up all 3 years. So in this case, the only option, if she has the strength to fast for 3 continuous months, then that's fine. But more likely than not, she is likely to be pregnant again after 3 years. Okay, so this can happen also. So it becomes just a circle. So in this case, what she should do, she should give fidya for the missed fast. She should basically just feed a poor person. About traveling, all the four schools of thought, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Hanbali and Maliki, say that the journey of a person should commence before dawn. When a person is traveling, his journey should commence before dawn, and the traveler should have reached a point from where the prescribed prayer becomes overdue before dawn. So basically, he needs to start traveling before his fasting starts to be regarded as a traveler. Hence, if he or she commences the journey after the setting in of dawn, it is unlawful for him or her to break the fast, and if he or she breaks it, its making up for it will be obligatory upon him or her without an atonement, without a kafara. Okay, so basically he doesn't have to fast for the 60 days. One fast has to be made up, but it is permissible for him to break the fast, but one qada has to be done. The Shafi'is add another condition, which is that the traveler should not be the one who generally travels continuously, such as a driver. So if he is traveling habitually, he is not entitled to break the fast. This is according to Imam Shafi'i's school of thought. Therefore, a traveler who fulfills all the conditions has the option of fasting or not fasting. And we find that actually in the hadith, you'll find both riwayat are mentioned. To some, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked about fasting while traveling, he used to tell them it's not good to fast. To others, he used to tell them to fast. So basically, he used to gauge the people according to their ability and tell them according to their ability whether they could fast or not fast. So the same thing applies to us. If a person feels that he can do the fasting without any harm to his health and without any problems, then he should fast. And if he feels that he's going to have trouble, then he doesn't need to fast. He can just make it up later. There's an interesting riwayah. The Prophet ﷺ was approached by a person who had a specific dialect, and this is actually mentioned in a hadith. That dialect was a dialect of meme, okay, which means that every single letter, every single word, he entered the letter meme inside it. So the riwayah says that this person came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "Hal min birrim siyamim fim safar," which is, the actual wording is, "Hal min birrin siyamun fis safar." Is it good to fast while on a journey? Is it good to fast while on a journey? The Prophet ﷺ actually responded back to him in his own dialect. "Laysa min birrim siyamim fim safar," which is, "Laysa min birrin siyamun fis safar." It's not good to fast in the journey. So this is a riwayah, and again it tells us how the Prophet ﷺ was very particular about getting close to the people who used to come to him, so much so that he even tried to talk in their dialect. Okay, so basically the thing is, when a person is traveling, he doesn't need to fast. If he does, it is fine. And obviously in this day and age, when traveling is not that difficult, you have air-conditioned cars, air-conditioned buses, air-conditioned planes, and the journey is not that long. Rather than breaking the fast and making it up later, he should try to fast. Now the problem occurs in air travel sometimes, when a person is on a particularly long journey. The question that many people ask is that how do you actually measure your fasting when you are traveling? Do you do it according to the place from where you set off from, or do you do it according to the destination, or what? The answer is basically that wherever you are in the plane, that's where you break your fast or start the fast, if you want to start the fast from that particular point. Now if you're traveling eastwards, what happens is that the day passes very, very quickly. Okay, so say for example, you started from New York at 12 noon, and the plane basically goes eastward. Within maybe 4 hours, you would see the sunset outside, and you would break the fast. Even though if you were in New York, you would have to wait till around 8 o'clock, 8 hours later. But because you are traveling towards the east, the day basically becomes very short. You're traveling towards the sunset, or you're traveling towards the time where you're shortening the day because you're traveling eastwards. However, when you're traveling westwards, what happens is the day becomes very, very lengthy. Okay, so if you're traveling eastwards, it makes sense to maybe just keep the fast. If you're traveling westwards, what happens is, say for example, you set off from London at 9 in the morning, you get here after 10 hours of flying, and it's still only like 11 a.m. So you still have to wait. You waited already about 10 hours from the time you started the suhoor until the flight takes off, and then after that there was a 10-hour flight, and then after the 10-hour flight you reach here, then there's still another 10 hours for you to break the fast. So it becomes a 24, 25, even 30-hour fast for you. So this happens when you're traveling westwards. Now when you travel to Australia and you cross the international date line, weird things happen. If you're traveling towards Australia, what happens is you actually miss a complete day. And then when you are traveling eastwards, back from Australia, what happens is that you start off, say for example, you start off on Monday, and you start traveling towards America. What happens is that you will get here approximately the same time that you set off from Australia. So it's a very strange thing that happens. So for that, you'd have to work it out for yourself what you want to do. But in any case, you have the option not to fast, but if you can, you should try to fast. Now acute thirst, this is the next reason where a person can break his fast. Acute thirst basically means a person feels that he is about to die because of his dehydration. There's consensus amongst all the schools that one suffering from a malady of acute thirst can break his fast, and if that person can carry out the missed fast later, it will be obligatory upon him or her without any atonement, in the opinion of all of the four schools of thought. The elderly, the old people, men and women in late years of their life for whom fasting is harmful and difficult are excused from fasting, but they have to give the fidya. And what is the fidya? Basically across all schools of thought, fidya is giving a needy person, a poor person, one meal for each fast missed. One meal for each fast missed. And the same is true of a sick person who does not hope to recover during the whole year. If a person is in a perpetual sickness, he is not hoping to, and the doctors are telling him that it's going to take you a whole year to recover from this illness, then he is also not obligated to fast. He should just give fidya, and he will not be penalized for this. When a person is going through these excuses, sickness, menstruation, whatever the excuses are, if they stop, what is a person obligated to do now? So if the reason permitting not fasting no longer exists, such as a sick person becomes well, or the child becomes mature, okay, so halfway through Ramadan, a person attains bulugh, becomes baligh, or a traveler, he basically reaches home, or the menstruation of a woman finishes, it is recommended in the views of the Shafi'i to refrain from things that break the fast as a token of respect during the day. Okay, so during the day, if a person comes home from his travel, he didn't start the fast because of his travel and all the other things that we've just mentioned, now what should he do? Because he's home, he didn't fast, should he eat? So Imam Shafi'i, he says, out of respect, the person should not eat, he should not eat the rest of the day. And the Hanbalis and the Hanafis consider refraining it as obligatory. They're a little bit more strict. They say that you should not eat the rest of the day, because the reason for you not fasting has now finished, so you should not eat the rest of the day also. Even though you have to make up that fast, but still the rest of the day you shouldn't eat. Malikis, they basically take a neutral stance. They say it's neither obligatory nor recommended, it's up to the person, whatever he wants to do. If he wants to eat, that's fine. If he doesn't want to eat, that's fine also. What are the things that a person is supposed to refrain from? Basically, there are three things that break the fast. Three things that break the fast: eating, drinking, and intimacy with one's wife. Okay, or basically sexual satisfaction by other means. Okay, these things will break the fast. So if any of these things happen, a person has to, if a person did these things deliberately eats, then he has to pay the kafara, and I'll talk about the kafara in a minute. Deliberately drinks, then he has to pay the kafara. Deliberately had intercourse with one's wife, he has to pay the kafara. Okay, what is the kafara? Firstly, if a person has a slave, it's not applicable in this day and age. So in the old days, if a person had a slave, he had to set the slave free. So we don't have that anymore, so you go to the second step. The second step is to fast for 60 days continuously. To fast for 60 days continuously, then this is the second step. There should not be any break in the middle. You have to fast for 60 days. The third thing is, if a person cannot even do that, then he should feed 60 poor people. 60 poor people have to be fed by him, and that's basically what the kafara of the fasting is. Okay, so I'm going to read through the text. Both eating and drinking deliberately invalidate the prescribed fast, and necessitate making up for the fast miss in the opinion of all the schools, although they differ as to whether atonement is also obligatory. The Hanafis require it, but not the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, meaning the kafara, the fidya, is due or not. A person who eats and drinks by an oversight is neither liable to make up for missed fasts nor atonement, except in the opinion of the Malikis, who only require its being made up. Included in drinking is inhaling tobacco smoke. So basically, if a person forgetfully eats, then he doesn't have to make that up. He doesn't have to make that fast up. This is across the board. The Malikis, they say that it should be made up. Intercourse, when deliberate, invalidates the prescribed fast and makes one liable to make up for missed fasts and atonement, meaning the kafara, in the opinion of all the schools. The atonement is the freeing of a slave, number one, and if that is not possible, fasting for 2 consecutive months, which I just mentioned. If even that is not possible, person is weak, cannot do it, whatever the reason is, he's ill, he cannot fast for 60 days continuously, then feeding 60 poor people. The Malikis actually allow an option between these two. So they say you have a choice. You can either fast for 60 continuous days, or you can feed 60 poor people. The others, they say no choice. It has to be in that order. The Shafi'is and Hanbalis and Hanafis impose atonement in the above mentioned order. That is, releasing a slave is specifically obligatory if a person has it. In the event of incapacity, fasting becomes obligatory, and if that too is not possible, giving food to the poor becomes obligatory. Sexual intercourse by oversight, by mistake. During the day, husband and wife go to sleep, and during the course of their sleep, half awake, they forget that it's the daytime, they think it's night, and they have intercourse, not even realizing what happened. Or they think that the clock on the wall stopped during the night, and they think it's 3 a.m. and it's already past suhoor time, and they engage in intercourse. So what happens is, in this case of oversight, the fidya, the kafara is not due. They would just have to make up one fast. If a person's semen comes out on purpose, okay, there's 2 situations. Okay, there's the issue of masturbation. The second issue is if a person has a wet dream. So in the case of purposefully having an orgasm, that will invalidate the fast. But kafara is not due. One fast has to be made up. Okay. In the case of not doing it on purpose, basically it is done. It happens while a person is sleeping, so the fast is still valid. It doesn't have to be made up. A question that many people have, and it comes up quite frequently, is that my wife and I, we engaged in intercourse during the night, so we woke up and we only had enough time to eat, and we didn't have time to take a shower, so we started this fasting in the state of impurity. Is that fast valid or not? The fast is completely valid. Okay? The only thing that is impermissible is actually engaging in intercourse after the time has started. Okay? Starting the fast in the state of impurity, that is perfectly fine. You can just take a ghusl after the time has started and pray Fajr within time, inshallah. And again, a person, for example, overslept, missed his Fajr completely, obviously not on purpose, but he missed it. So a person, he thinks back, he says, oh no, I had intercourse last night and I overslept, so what do I do now? He can basically continue the fast, take a shower, make up for the missed prayer, and continue the fast. There's no problem with it. What about vomiting? Vomiting, it invalidates the fast if it's deliberate, and the opinion of the Shafis and Malikis also necessitates making up for the fast. The Hanafi state that deliberate vomiting does not break the prescribed fast until the quantity vomited fills the mouth. Okay, if it's a big amount, the Hanafi school of thought says, then it will break the fast. 2 views have been narrated from Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal the schools concur that involuntary fasting, vomiting, does not invalidate the prescribed fast. So people ask me this question all the time. They say that vomiting, does it break the fast? It does not. Vomiting, which is done involuntarily. Okay? However, there's a secondary issue. A person, he had his suhoor, and now his suhoor, basically he vomits it all out completely. And as a result of that, now he is feeling fatigue, weakness, and he feels that he cannot go on with his fast anymore. So the secondary result of the vomiting is the weakness, fatigue, and so on, dehydration, whatever it is. So in that case, he can break the fast because of that secondary thing, not because of the fact that the vomiting broke the fast, but because of the weakness that occurs as a result of the fast. Okay, so vomiting does not break the fast, but weakness as a result, as a consequence of the vomiting, that will allow a person to break the fast and make up for it later. Injections, people ask all the time. The ruling is that injections, they do not break the fast unless and until they are those type of injections that give you nutrition. Okay, so for example, IV, when a person is dehydrated, a person can actually survive on the IV, intravenous fluid, saline fluid, or whatever it is that they put. A person can survive without eating and drinking for many days, just on that fluid that is going through his veins. So that type of injection it invalidates the fast. However, shots, other types of injections, these type of injections do not break the fast. It is permissible for a person to do it. The other thing is, people ask about going to the dentist. Now the issue is, going to the dentist is fine, but the problem is if the dentist is doing a cleaning, and you know what they do during the cleaning, they basically jet water. There's a whole stream of water going into your mouth. If you swallow that water, then your fast is broken. Okay, so if it's just an examination, then obviously the fast is not going to break. But if the cleaning is going to take place, it's highly likely that because of the water that is going in, that the fast is likely to break. So don't make any dentist appointments in Ramadan. Okay. The application of what's known as surma or kuhl, is it permissible or not? The Malikis say that it does break the fast, provided that you can taste the kuhl in the back of your throat. Sometimes you apply it to your eyes and somehow the taste of it gets into your throat. The Malikis say that it will break the fast. The other schools of thought, they say no. If a person, to get cool, he submerges his head inside water, what should he do? I mean, does that break the fast? It does not break the fast, obviously, as long as a person is not swallowing the water. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I can open up the floor for questions. There's a few more other things related to this issue, different types of fasting, nafil fasting, and so on. But I can open up for Q&A, inshallah, if anybody wants to ask a question. Go ahead.
The amount of feeding at work, so I'm feeding in India, Pakistan, like $1 meal, is that good? Or it has to be, India?
Yeah. The question that is being asked is that what should be the amount of food be for the poor person that is fed in lieu of breaking a fast? So the answer is basically one meal. Whatever is the urf means whatever is understood to be a meal in that particular locality, that is to be given to a person. Okay, so if one plate is regarded as a meal and that's sufficient for that poor person, that one plate, however much it costs. So in America it might cost a little bit more, in India it would probably cost less. So whatever it is recognized to be a meal, that is to be given to the poor person.
Now, in this fast, any other, and then when it comes to Salaah, when you start fasting 6 Salaah, you need to fast 1 Ramadan?
Yeah, the question is that the person, he missed his fast during the month of Ramadan, and now he wants to fast the Nafil fast of Shawwal. Should he make up the fast that he missed first, or can he just fast the days of Shawwal? The answer is that the fard fasting, it takes precedence. It needs to be prioritized and needs to be done before the Nafil fasting. So that should be made up first before engaging in Nafil fasting. Yes?
Can you use toothpaste?
The question is, can you use toothpaste while fasting? The answer to that question is that traditionally it is regarded as makruh to use toothpaste. Makruh, why? Because there's a high likelihood that you may swallow it. Now in this, the thing that we have in this society, especially if you're going to work, it just doesn't feel good that if a person is around his co-workers with bad breath. Okay, so if a person needs to, if a person really needs to, he can use toothpaste, but he needs to be very careful that he doesn't swallow it, because if he does swallow, then the fast will become invalid. Okay, people say that the taste of it is what makes it makruh. It's not the taste, it's the issue of swallowing it. You're allowed to use the miswak at all times, and miswak has a taste too. You're allowed to use the miswak while fasting, and that has a taste too, and sometimes it's even stronger than toothpaste. So if you can get hold of a fresh miswak and use it, it actually serves just as good, if not better, than toothpaste. So if you can do that, that's the best case scenario. So basically, try to avoid toothpaste if you can. If you need to use it because of going to work and so on, use it, but be absolutely sure that you're not swallowing it. Use a very minimal amount, and the best case scenario is to not use toothpaste at all, just use a miswak.
Question from the internet.
Yeah.
This is where if you're applying lipstick, break your fast.
The question is, does applying lipstick break the fast? No, technically it does not break the fast. But if there's not going to be any intimacy between husband and wife, what's the need for it? So you're only going to put on the lipstick, hopefully, adorn yourself for your husband, right? So, but no, it won't break the fast. No.
What about the miswak with flavor? You come with the flavor of water.
No, it's fine. The question is, what about the miswak with flavor? Like mint flavor and so on, it's fine. Yes.
You mentioned the starting of the travel before dawn. So if you have a flight, what about the afternoon? You should not miss the.
Yeah, basically you started the fast in the state of not traveling. So ideally you should just make it up. You should finish it because you didn't start it. But however, even in this case, if you break the fast because you started traveling, you would only have to make up 1. You don't have to make up 60. Yes.
What about Libra working in the construction area under the heat of the sun? You have to leave the hole, and if you find them harsh on him, will he consider the fast or?
The question is that a person, he's working in construction, he's working out in the heat of the sun, so what should he do? My suggestion for that person would be that he should try to start the fast, and then during the course of the day, if he feels exhaustion and he feels that he cannot continue, then he should break the fast, and then he should make it up at a later date. Okay, so we had, for example, we had a person, a convert, a couple of years back, became Muslim. He worked outside. His family had a business of constructing tents outside, and he was very concerned about this whole issue of fasting out in the heat. And I told him the same thing. He started it, alhamdulillah, he managed to pull through, but he was a young man, so possibly because of his young age he could cope with it. But in the situation where a person feels that his health may be damaged because of that, he can break the fast and make it up maybe in the winter days at a later date. Any other questions? Okay, alhamdulillah. You have? Okay.
What happens to people who live in a place like Alaska or up north where they have like 22-hour days? How where do they fall for them? What place?
Are you intending to move there? Then why do you want to know? As curious. Okay. The question is that what about those places that have 22-hour days, like Alaska and so on? Now this is actually, even if you go to Britain, many parts of Northern Europe, it's very, very strange. This time of the year, if you go to England and you step outside after Isha, you would still actually see light in the day, a light in the sky. Although it's dark, but it doesn't get completely dark. So what I do when I go for my vacation is basically what happens is there's not a time when Isha time actually starts, because Isha time is supposed to start when darkness comes in, when the sky becomes dark. So Isha time doesn't actually start. So what you do is you pray just about an hour and a quarter after Maghrib, because it's not going to get any darker than what it already is. Okay? And then about an hour or so later, about 1:30 a.m., people just pray Fajr and go to sleep, because the Fajr beginning time, it starts when the darkness ends and the light comes in. The light of dawn comes in. But the light of dawn basically never finished. The light was continuously and perpetually there all the time. So you just have to calculate, just make up a time, calculate and pray at that time. Now this becomes a huge issue in Ramadan, that 1:30 you're praying Fajr, then when you're going to actually start the fast. So then there are basically two opinions about that. One opinion is, no, if you're going to pray Fajr at 1:30, then by about 1:15 you just stop eating and then you continue the fast. The other opinion is that you try to take it all the way up to the darkness, up to the actual sunrise, and an hour or so before sunrise, or hour and a half before sunrise, you basically stop eating. Okay, so that's basically how it's calculated. In the situation where there's no night whatsoever, what you do is you calculate according to the nearest country that has a proper night and a proper day. Now this is also based on a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ actually said that when the Dajjal comes, then the time will basically yataqarabu zaman. The time will become shrink. It will shrink, so that a year will become like a month will become like a week will become like a day will become like an hour. So the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, when the time is going to be like this, then how are we going to pray our salat, which is the 5 times daily salat? The Prophet ﷺ said, Hasibu, you have to make hisab, calculate. So calculation basically in a perpetual place where 6 months it's night, 6 months it's day, you would take a 24-hour cycle, and then just at given times you would just pray the 5 times salat, irrespective of where the sun is. Okay, so the same applies to fasting. You would just go to a closest country where there is a proper night and a proper day, and go according to their timetable. Okay, inshallah we'll wrap up now. Jazakumullah khairan for participating.
جئت بالأمر المطاع جئت الله